Hello, audience. It's my pleasure to be in front of you and talking to you about this very interesting topic on future of digital payments in India. My name is Kunal Pandey. I'm a partner with KPMG in the digital practice, and I look after the financial services sector. With me, I have two very eminent personalities, people who have spent a lot of their time on digital payments and have worked very closely in the Indian market. First gentleman who is with us is Mr. Sajid Sivanandan. He is the MD and head of Google Pay in India. And we have with him we have Mr. T.R. Ramchandran, Country Group Manager, Visa, India and South Asia. These two people, as I said, have done a lot of work in this area, and I'm very excited to talk to them about their experiences and sharing the same with you. Without further much ado, I would ask the first question. My first question is, around the customers, and when we look at digital payments or payments in general, I think one of the center stage is about customers, and one has to look at how one wins customers. We have seen a lot of focus on winning customers by way of discounts or other incentives. Mr. Sajid, I wanted to take your thoughts and would like you to share your experiences with the audience on what do you think are winning strategies for customer acquisition and things which could be beyond some of these elements of given incentives, etc. So please.
Thank you, Kunal, for the question, and a big thanks to EG for having me here as well. It's said that in India, to win, any company or any person needs to master of ABCD, which is A for astrology, B for Bollywood, C for cricket, and D for divinity. And if you use the same framework, for us, the way we thought about this was A, how can we be truly accessible? And so we put the inclusion lens there. B is sort of be everywhere, because ultimately payments a two-sided coin. C is for very deep customer focus, and D is really about delivering on promise, right? So I think if you just take these four lens filters, if you will, that's what it takes for us to build a business and a user base and more in this space, and indeed in most businesses, right? And let me get into a little bit of depth in each one of them. Happy to take any questions thereafter. But from an accessibility perspective, look, it's very important. The beauty of what we are doing here is that payments is not just it is not just a kind of top 7 cities phenomenon, if you will, right? Like in India, and usually they think of India 1, 2, and 3. Payments is now Bharat. And it's kind of everywhere. So really figuring out how we do that and how we can be everywhere, sort of just from an inclusion perspective, is very, very critical. And so a majority of our users are actually outside the top 7 cities, right? Is like a very, very good indicator of that. But as we build on that, we all recognize that payments is a two-sided ecosystem. It's also not just about having users, but you also want to have places to pay. So you have to be everywhere, right? And I think that's an area we've kind of really doubled down on over the last 18 odd months. And, both Ashneer and Ram know far more about that space, but, really the building those places to pay is incredibly critical, so that it kind of just creates that virtuous cycle, if you will. And just from a customer focus angle, which is kind of like the seed that I was talking about, there's a bunch of things that we have done that we think shows us sort of to be very, very local, very focused on, what India needs. We've done Rangoli in the past. We've done a Go India game that we did last year around Diwali. So there's a lot of, I think, things that we do just to ensure that customers know we're thinking about them, speak to them at the time of relevance. And also we're building on different use cases so that, look, ultimately what customers really want, what users really want is choice, right? Like they want the option of choice. And And so the work that we're doing with Visa and a set of issuers around tokenized cards, and what we're doing on the Ace credit cards with Axis and Visa again, shows that it's about offering those options as well, and continuing on that deep customer focus. And then look, ultimately, all of this just falls flat on its face if you can't deliver on your promise.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think this is the one area that I think we all collectively as an ecosystem have to do still so much work on, just in the area of reliability and sort of fighting fraud. I think it's incredibly critical as an ecosystem, banks, NPCI, all of us players, right, networks and rails and others, all come together to ensure that, look, we're at basically near flawless levels of reliability, and then that there is zero fraud, and as that happens, as you start to deliver on all of these promises that you make, that's when all of these things start to come together, customer growth starts to happen. So ultimately, look, it's about being available to everyone, being present everywhere, deep customer focus, and then delivering on promise.
Thanks, Sajid. And I think the ABCD, as you started with, is really powerful. I think all of us grew up learning ABCD in the payment space. Again, as you have said, there is ABCD, and customers being at the center of it is really there. And I think the point which you made about looking at what the Indian customer is wanting and some of the initiatives which you have done. I think there would be strategies around it, and the promise, to make sure that the one delivers to the promise is really important. I would probably, go to Mr. Ramchandran, to you. You have been in the payment space. I think from the time I first had a debit card or a credit card in my hand, maybe before that actually. Let me say, and you have been seeing how the entire environment is moving, and have had a razor sharp focus on what customers are looking for and how one can deliver. So I would ask the same question to you too, and would like to have your thoughts to be shared with the audience, and some examples, if you please. Thanks.
Yeah, so I would say that making payments ubiquitous and making payments frictionless are the two pivots, apart from the third important pivot, which Sajid rightly mentioned, which is making payments secure, right? Why ubiquitous? Because whether it's India A or India B or Bharat or whichever is the latest acronym, it has to be sort of democratized and not only available to a particular subset of customers, right? That's sort of ubiquity. And the reach of telecom and the reach of video in particular has shown us that it can spread across socio and economic sort of strata. The second is frictionless. Let's remember that in India, our biggest person we're fighting against is cultural propensity to use cash and to accept cash and to pay by cash.
Yeah.
And therefore, rather than buck the trend, I would submit that payments have to be as convenient, as seamless, as interoperable, as smooth as giving a 100 rupee note to a shopkeeper and the shopkeeper sort of receiving it. That's the sort of gold standard that we have to go to. And number three is in terms of security, right? And I'll talk a little bit about it later, but I would say that security, because India is taking baby steps towards payment, right? Only 15% of India is sort of digitized in the personal consumption expenditure space. Consequently, anywhere where we're taking baby steps, we don't want an I told you so if something goes belly up and customers hastily retreat back to their erstwhile habits of using cash. So it's incumbent upon us payment system operators to ensure and work with the ecosystem, work with the regulator, work with the government in order to give the customer that confidence and that trust of payments, right? And the rest, we underestimate how soon things are adopted in the Indian market. Provided you have interoperability, you have frictionless convenience, and you have security, right? What we have seen in the sort of nice sweet spot between demonetization and the pandemic was one sort of J curve, but you're going to see several more kinks to the J curve going forward, because this is a decadal secular growth opportunity for consumer growth in India in payments.
Thanks, Mr. Arjun. And I think the way you have articulated also is really easy to understand. It has to be ubiquitous. That's how the participants, customers, and merchants will participate. It has to be really frictionless. And the 100 rupee example is something which I also often take. So it is not just about making the payment when you're buying the good, but to make sure that 100 rupee reaches the bank account of the supplier, and the supplier can use it without any concern that it will not be there. So very well said as an example to explain that. And I think one of the point which you raised there is around the ubiquitousness and merchants really come into play there. Of course, there is payment on P2P where remittances are happening, but a lot of payments are around fulfillment of the payment for any product or service which a customer buys, and that's where the merchant acceptance becomes really important. And while from my lens, I see it is growing, and I think India as a country needs much more. And a lot of innovative stuff also has happened on that, and some of it people like you who are in the panel have done that. So no better person to ask people like you. And Sajid, maybe if I can ask you the same question on the merchant acceptance, what's happening in India, what are some of the newer things which the industry is focusing on, anything which you believe as an ecosystem one needs to do to really take the merchant acceptance of digital payments through across the country. So any insights if you could share would be really useful to us, the audience. Thanks.
It's a very critical question. I touched upon the fact that indeed payments and is a two-sided coin. Look, let's start with the basics, right? I think in, the first thing you want is to have a network in place, right? Like, and by network, I meant just like acceptance everywhere. Ram also touched upon that in his opening remarks as well. And, I think there is some, it depends on which source you listen to, but I think RBI kind of says there's upwards of over 20 million now QR, codes that are around in the country. There's about, I think, 5 million POS machines, right? And counting. Now, I think it's critical that we get like all of these merchants, regardless of size, scale, location. We need to be able to find them and bring them online, right? And by connecting them. And I think whilst to some extent you'll see high visibility in these tiers 1, 2, 3 cities, but I think tiers 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, which is kind of what the PIDF is meant to drive, seeks to address that. So number one is pan India universal sort of at least adoption of any one form. Because look, you want to build the highway first, right? Like, and that's what really this is about. So number one, I think there's still a lot of work to be done there, and I view this as less about, it shouldn't be a battle for space, but it should be a battle for like bringing these merchants online, right? Like, and it's not going to be easy to do. It takes a lot of investments. We've invested in this space a lot. Others, both Ram, Ashni, have also done that a fair bit. So that's, I think the number one place that I'd start from. And then you want to start building on top of that, right? Like, what are the other kind of services that the merchants will need? And how do we ensure that transactions and all of those things happen reliably and securely? And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in that area by the ecosystem. So, I genuinely believe in start with the basics, have strong foundations. You can build anything you want on top of, very strong foundations, but having presence everywhere, having reliable and secure and fast transactions are the two kind of corners. But I see that Ashwini is also joined back, and no doubt, Ram will also have some thoughts as well. So let me pause.
Thanks, Rajit. And I think what you're saying is right, that this is a highway which has to be built, and it has to be super reliable so that merchants really are able to be onboarded. And I also believe it has to be super simple for them. Maybe I'll pose the same question to Mr. Ramchandran, to you. You have been again driving the built of ecosystem for ages. Visa has been doing that. So your thoughts in the Indian context on merchant acceptance and what is needed and some things which have already been done.
Payments is a two-sided network, correct? And the consumer adoption side has always been the more fashionable side of the house, right? Where all the dancing and all the activity takes place. But the hard yards is actually where the acceptance infrastructure needs to be built, because payments are only as relevant to a customer as, if you can step out of house and use it everywhere. If you can only use it in pockets, then by definition, payments are not very useful. So it has to be useful for everyone, for everywhere, right? So that's how payments acceptance infrastructure needs to be built. And when you compare ourselves to some comparable countries, let's take Russia. So per 100,000 citizens, Russia has probably about 2,000 terminals or merchants. China and Brazil have between 3 and 3,500 per 100,000 citizens. India still has 500, right? So we have 8x, 10x to go, even to catch up to countries like Brazil and China. Never mind catch up with countries like the US or UK. And in that regard, so many of the efforts that players are making, whether it's established acquirers or new players or fintechs, is admirable. And I think the government and RBI is seized of it. I think the Payment Infrastructure Development Fund, or the PIDF, is one of the most exciting developments to come out of the RBI for payments in recent times, with an avowed sort of goal of 30 million merchants, right? Which is a large and ambitious goal. But we need a little bit of ambition if we have to pave the acceptance network. And by the way, this is also the first time, probably, Kunal, you may want to do some research, but I think, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that a regulator is also contributing to the fund, apart from payment system ecosystem participants contributing to the fund, which is, like Sajid mentioned, towards tier 5 and tier 6, towards northeastern places, etc., etc. And we need many more such innovative mechanisms in order for the acceptance network to grow. But this is absolutely foundational in terms of growing of electronic digital payments in the country.
Thanks, and I think what you're saying is right. That the regulators, paying for the development process in this manner has not been many times there. India has been known, so in telecom also we had seen the USOF, Universal Service Obligation Fund, to develop the infrastructure, and I'm also equally excited that with this. Fund being there, and with all of you really trying to make sure that we further accelerate, there is a bright future out there from a payment side. That brings me towards my last question, and as it is said in Stratton's law, which was after a gentleman who actually had robbery as his business. He was asked that, why do you rob banks? And he said, I rob banks because that's where the money is. And in today's environment, actually money is not there in a bank in a typical manner of a branch, but it's all in the digital ecosystem. And payments, while it is a fabulous thing, digital payments to enable business, it also has its own degree of risks coming in. So from a cyber security and risk side, how do you see payments developing? There are lots of challenges which we are still seeing, and and I know organizations like yours, along with others, are doing a lot of work there. So I would like to hear your thoughts. Maybe I'll start with Mr. Ramchandran, you first, on the cybersecurity elements, and also if you could touch upon that newer technologies are coming in. So we are seeing voice-enabled payment interactions with customers. So how these new technologies will also be handled from this angle. So over to you for your thoughts and insights.
Thanks, I'm happy to do that. Firstly, like I said on cybersecurity at the beginning, we have to recognize that the sender of the payment and the receiver of the payment both are in their nascent stages of receiving a payment. So a fraud can happen at both ends, right? I don't know how to pay, so somebody is exploiting that, getting my details and sort of impersonating me to make the payment. And similarly, somebody is fooling the merchant or the sort of receiver of the payments. And we have to understand that in 2021, it's no longer sort of two malevolent kids sitting in a garage trying to sort of fraud the system. These are very large, very well funded, deep pocket actors who are focusing on frauding the electronic payments infrastructure. Sometimes there are nation states involved in it. That's the scary depth to which the fraud exists. And therefore, we have to keep customers transparent to all of this and make sure that we build deep and also build walls which are high enough so sort of fraudsters cannot penetrate. And I can tell you from Visa's experience, it is a 24/7, 365 kind of job to erect thicker, deeper, more redundant sort of firewalls, and be more proactive than sort of reactive. And the second part of the security is, what do you do with the customer data itself? And customer data is a very, very touchy point anywhere in the globe today, right? Sovereigns are worried about it. People like you and me are worried about it, et cetera, et cetera. And now, so technologies like, for example, tokenization, which actually devalues customer data, right? And sort of encrypts it and devalues it. So even if it were to fall into the wrong hands, it becomes meaningless. So I believe that tokenization has to become ubiquitous. And segueing into what you said about newer technologies like IoT, at Visa, we think there'll be 20 to 25 billion connected devices on the planet, apart from 7 or 8 billion mobile phones. And so if those connected devices are going to talk to each other and at some level make payments, we have to engender a level of security which is embedded into the security by design and security by architecture into the sort of IoT scheme of things. I'll stop there, and maybe Sajid has a point of view as well.
Thanks. Yeah, Sajid, over to you for your thoughts on this area.
No, I mean, just generally echo the points that Ram had made. As you know, I mean, this is an area that is incredibly foundational to what we do. And Google's very focused on this area. And I think one of the things that our engineers have done is an incredible job of bringing to bear AI and ML learnings to sort of be able to find the right signals, be able to distinguish, what's genuine versus what is not. However, as Ram pointed out, this is not a static kind of target, if you will. Neither is it, it's moving. And anytime we do something, one of the interesting things that we've discovered, I use the word interesting, but it's worrying also, is that these fraud vectors, they just keep changing.
Yeah.
Today you disable something, next thing they get smarter. And also the other thing is, it's very hard, no matter how hard you try from an AI, ML, all of these other, two factors and all of that stuff, it makes it very hard if social engineering keeps happening, right? So I think the user education bit, along with everything else that engineers can do and will do, is very, very critical. The awareness that users need to have about, the things that they should not share is very, very critical. And I think that is, there's still some work that we need to do on that. And we need to continually do that work, because look, digital payments will only grow. And there'll be more people who come on different kind of rails that are digital. And it's very, very critical for us to continue that education.
Thanks, Sajid. And from my view, I think India as a society and culture is of openness. We are very, we have people who share about our backgrounds, our personal information very, very easily. So the problem is really more there. And this is really an area where now it's not about people sitting in garages, Ramchandra, you were saying. It's people who really have a business. And these people, when they run this business of illegitimate businesses, they don't have to fear about any regulations or anything. And they are keep on hunting on where they can make money about. So we believe it's a journey. And I think the point which you mentioned, right from, making it more deeper controls, as well as newer technologies like AI, ML coming in to, handle the security and customer education, I think that journey has to continue. But thanks for sharing your insights, and coming from you, these are real things which payment industry needs to evolving. I think we are also coming to the end of our session. I would just close it by saying thank you to both of you. And I think the ABCD of the payment which you started with, Sajid, and the elements on ubiquitousness and frictionless environment, and of course cybersecurity, which you alluded to, Ram and Sajid both. They are really interesting, and I hope the audience benefited from it. I would again thank you, both of you, on behalf of the audience and from my side also. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
all.
Thank you, everyone.